Welcome to This Explainer. Economics usually gets a pretty bad rap as just this giant, confusing monolith of math and boring charts. But honestly, it's really not. It's actually a super fascinating set of lenses that we can use to analyze the real world. And today, we're going to unpack how simply shifting between the micro and macro lenses completely changes everything we see. So think about your morning routine for a second. Have you ever wondered why your everyday cup of coffee suddenly got more expensive? Well, to answer a hyper-specific question like that, we have to pick the right economic lens. We have to decide, are we going to isolate the individual, everyday variables, or do we need to zoom way, way out to look at the massive systemic forces? When you lay it all out, the entire field of economics naturally splits right down the middle into two distinct domains. Over on one side, you've got this small view. That's microeconomics, where we isolate individual things like consumers, households, and specific businesses. Then, way over on the other side is the large view, macroeconomics. And that's where we group the entire economy together to look at massive concepts like GDP, nationwide inflation, and overall unemployment. Part 1, Microeconomics, the close-up view. Okay, let's start by zooming in on that first side. Microeconomics, which literally comes from the Greek word for small, zeroes right in on the specific decisions made by individuals, single households, and individual businesses. It's really asking one fundamental question. How do these individual players decide to divide up their limited resources to get the most value or the most profit in a specific market? Actually, the best way to think about it is like walking into a massive forest, but completely ignoring the forest itself. Instead, you stop, pull out a microscope, and study the exact biological makeup of just one single tree. You're looking at the bark, the leaves, the roots, completely in isolation. You are deliberately filtering out the rest of the ecosystem just to understand that one specific unit. With this super close-up lens, we are isolating very specific things. We're looking at how supply and demand drive specific prices. We're looking at consumer behavior, like why you buy what you buy based on your income. We're looking at how a business makes decisions to optimize its profits, and even how specific labor markets and market structures actually operate. The whole theme here is laser-focused on individual actors. So, bringing it back to that coffee scenario, if the price of coffee suddenly shoots up, a microeconomist is going to ask really targeted behavioral questions. Things like, okay, are consumers going to ditch coffee and switch to tea? Or how are local cafes going to adjust their pricing strategies to survive? And will coffee bean suppliers suddenly scale up their production because they want those higher profit margins? It is 100% about the behavior of those specific buyers and sellers. Part 2, Macroeconomics, the economy-wide view. Right, so now we are going to completely shift our perspective. Macroeconomics, macro meaning large, of course, shifts the entire scope to the performance, the structure, and the behavior of the economy as one giant, complete entity. We are totally done analyzing that single coffee shop. Now we're tracking massive aggregate trends that sweep across millions and millions of people all at once, either on a national or even a global scale. We are literally swapping out our microscope for a telescope. We step way, way back. We don't care about the individual tree anymore. Our lens widens out so we can assess the health, the density, and the overall growth of that entire forest from above. And at this altitude, the things we care about change completely. We aren't looking at the price of a single product anymore. We care about gross domestic product, or GDP. We track economy-wide inflation and total national unemployment. We study broad economic growth to figure out the overall standard of living. And we analyze fiscal and monetary policy, which are basically the big levers that governments and central banks pull to keep the whole system stable. To put that into perspective, let's say a major macro shock happens, like a sudden massive spike in global oil prices. A macroeconomist isn't going to look at one individual gas station. No way. They track the whole cascade effect. They ask, how is this expensive fuel going to inject inflation into the entire system? Is it going to stall out national economic growth or cause a massive wave of unemployment? And most importantly, how does the central bank need to step in and adjust interest rates to fix it? Part 3, Connecting the two worlds. So seeing these side by side makes it incredibly easy to keep them straight, right? They aren't totally distinct, but they perfectly mirror each other. Micro is all about consumers and specific markets, trying to figure out how resources are allocated using indicators like your wages or a company's profits. Macro, on the flip side, is all about national performance and global stability, relying on big data like GDP and national inflation. It's the micro-level tree versus the macro-level forest. But here is the absolute most important takeaway. The ultimate truth of this whole framework is that the economy as a whole is built entirely from the actions of millions of individuals and businesses. Those massive macroeconomic outcomes, like national inflation, they aren't just abstract forces floating in the sky. They are quite literally just the aggregated, compounding results of countless, tiny microeconomic decisions. The feedback loop between these two is constant. They are inextricably linked. Your individual decision to spend money today directly drives national consumption levels tomorrow. A single local business deciding to invest and expand feeds right into broader economic growth. And it goes the other way too. When a government passes a massive macroeconomic policy, it completely changes the incentives inside specific micro-level markets. You simply cannot have the macro forest without the micro trees. Which brings us to a final, pretty wild thought to leave you with. Since the macro forest really is just millions of micro trees, how is your next purchase shaping the global economy? Because every single time you buy that cup of coffee or, choose to save that cash instead, you're making a microeconomic choice that throws another data point into the giant macroeconomic pond. Economics isn't just dry theory. It is the aggregated story of our daily choices. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the forces behind your everyday decisions.